The storm didn't start with a scandal, it started with a gift. One day before Princess Anne's 75th birthday, King Charles stood alone in a quiet chamber of Buckingham Palace, holding a crimson velvet box. Inside it lay a priceless antique brooch, diamond-studded, centuries old, and once worn by Queen Elizabeth herself. This wasn't just a birthday present, it was a message. A nod to Anne's loyalty, a crown jewel meant for the only royal who never wavered. And Charles knew that. Maybe too well, but the moment he handed that box to the royal staff for safekeeping, something shifted. Like a fuse being lit. By morning, the gift had vanished. Or rather, what sat in the box now was an imitation. A cheap copy that wouldn't fool a street vendor, let alone the royal treasury. The keeper of the vault, Reginald Hawthorne, discovered it first, his hands shaking as he realized the original was gone. A switch had been made, and someone inside the palace had done it. King Charles was the first to know, but instead of panic, he made a decision that stunned even his most trusted aide. "Keep it quiet," he ordered. "We'll handle it." Internally, that's when the whispers started. You could feel it in the air at the gala that night. Beneath the clinking glasses and polite applause, something was off. A tension you couldn't name but definitely felt. Anne, stoic as always, sensed it immediately. Her eyes scanned the guests like a hawk, not for celebration, but for truth. The brooch was supposed to be on display, it wasn't, and that said everything. But it was Queen Camilla who drew the most attention, not for what she said, but how she smiled. It wasn't joy, it was satisfaction, like someone who had watched a rival lose a crown. She didn't need to speak. Her silence was already too loud. And then there was Kate, elegant, poised, quietly watching from the sidelines. She had no idea yet, but the palace had already started to turn its eyes on her. Camilla, always 2 steps ahead in the social war, had begun to spread whispers, soft suggestions over champagne. Kate wears green often, doesn't she? She was near the gift room last night. Curious, isn't it? One comment at a time, the court's suspicion was being shaped like clay, and Kate's name was the mold. But behind those whispers, something much bigger was unfolding. Charles hadn't just ordered silence. He'd orchestrated the entire switch himself. The fake brooch wasn't a mystery, it was a trap, a loyalty test, a psychological landmine dropped into the middle of his own family. He wanted to see who would break ranks, who would use the moment to rise or fall, and most of all, who would betray who. But not even he could predict what came next. A few days later, someone leaked the story to the press. Beef in the royal family, screamed the headlines. Antique brooch replaced in secret. They even had a blurry CCTV frame, a shadowy figure in a green dress caught near the gift room at 3:00 IMing. Her face was hidden, her identity unknown. But it didn't matter, the damage was done. All eyes turned to Kate, and in that moment, the palace didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a chessboard. And Kate and Camilla, 3 queens circling each other, none trusting the other, and at the center, a king who'd started a game he might not be able to finish. Because now, someone else was playing too, and they weren't following his rules. Camilla leaned against the marble balustrade of Clarence's house, staring into the rain-soaked garden. Her grip tightened around the teacup in her hand, knuckles pale. She hadn't leaked the story, but whoever did had just handed her a weapon. The public was now pointing fingers at Kate, and Camilla wasn't going to waste that momentum, not after years of standing in Princess Anne's shadow. Not when Charles had clearly chosen his sister to receive the brooch that should have gone to the queen. Kate had become the perfect scapegoat. Pretty, polished, popular, but vulnerable. She wasn't born into this family, and that made her expendable in Camilla's eyes. Camilla didn't need to destroy Kate, she just needed her isolated, alone in a storm of whispers. Meanwhile, Anne wasn't distracted by noise, she was focused on facts. Sitting in her private study, she summoned her inner circle and demanded action. "We don't need rumors," she said, voice cold and firm. "We need answers. Track who had access, who handled the box, who was near the vault." Her team moved like shadows, discreet and swift. Anne had always been direct, but now she was driven. Kate, on the other hand, was unraveling. She watched her name trend across social media. Green dress, camera footage, Duchess thief. All speculation, no truth. But in this game, truth wasn't the point. Perception was. Her staff had gone quiet, some avoided eye contact, even her closest allies hesitated when speaking. And worst of all, Charles hadn't said a word. She was in the middle of a storm that no one would acknowledge, so she did what she always did when cornered. She fought back. Quietly, strategically. Late one evening, she called in favors from her early charity days, staff who still believed in her. She asked them to check surveillance backups, access logs, even maintenance schedules. There's always a trail, she told them. We just have to find it. It didn't take long. A name surfaced, Thomas Reed, a junior palace staffer. Unremarkable, quiet, mostly invisible. But his name appeared on a maintenance schedule at 2:30 a.m., just 30 minutes before the woman in green was caught on tape. One of Kate's loyal aides intercepted Thomas in a side corridor near the archives. He was clutching a small external drive, his face pale, hands shaking. When pressed, he cracked fast. I was told to delete the footage, he stammered. I didn't know what it was. I was just told to do it. By who? The aide asked. He hesitated. A minor royal, not senior, not one of the big names, but someone who wasn't invited to the gala. Kate's mind raced. That narrowed it down. The brooch wasn't just about jealousy, it was personal. Whoever had leaked the story and tampered with the footage wasn't trying to steal diamonds. They were trying to sabotage reputations. She compiled everything. Thomas's testimony, the timeline, the surveillance data. She didn't confront Charles. Not yet. She wasn't interested in proving herself to the king. She wanted to corner the real player behind the curtain. But Kate wasn't the only one who'd found leverage. In another corner of the palace, Camilla reviewed her own findings. Her informants had been busy too. He'd learned about Thomas, about the footage, about Kate's quiet investigation, and now she was nervous. Because if Kate proved her innocence, the spotlight wouldn't just disappear, it would turn. And Camilla wasn't prepared to be in that kind of light. The air inside Buckingham Palace's war room felt heavier than usual. Velvet drapes blocked the sunlight, casting long shadows over the oak-paled walls. At the center, King Charles sat motionless, his face unreadable. Around the polished table, Anne, Camilla, and Kate took their seats, 3 women carrying secrets, suspicions, and a storm each. Kate stood first, calm, controlled, her voice cut through the tension like a blade. I've gathered evidence that clears my name, she said, placing a folder on the table. Testimony from Thomas Reed, security logs, and unaltered backup footage. I was not the woman in green, and I did not leak anything to the press. She didn't look at Camilla, but the silence after her words felt like a spotlight had landed on the queen. Charles didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the folder. Camilla shifted in her chair, her voice like silk wrapped around glass. So who was it then? Who swapped the brooch? We're all still waiting for that answer, aren't we? Her words were sharp, but her tone was soft. Performative restraint. Kate didn't flinch. According to Reed, the person who gave him the order was a minor royal who wasn't invited to the gala, someone with access, motive, and a grudge. A chill moved through the room. Anne spoke next. If that's true, then this isn't just a prank or a petty feud. This was a deliberate attempt to fracture the monarchy. And it worked. We've turned on each other while someone else watched it all burn. Charles finally spoke. No one broke into the vault. No outsider swapped the brooch. He paused, his voice heavy. I did. The room froze. I ordered the real brooch replaced with a replica, he said, eyes locked on the floor. It was a test. I wanted to see how each of you would respond under pressure. Who would act with integrity? Who would exploit the situation? Camilla stared at him in disbelief, her lips parting slowly. You set a trap for your own family? He nodded once, and it worked, but not the way I expected. Anne leaned forward, her voice low. You let the public destroy Kate's name just to see how she'd react? She was never meant to be the target, Charles replied, but once the leak happened, things spun out of control. I never authorized the story going to the press. Camilla stood. Her eyes burned with rage, but her voice was steady. You didn't trust me. After all these years, after everything I've done, you made me look like a suspect in front of the entire country. Charles looked at her, not with anger, but regret. didn't do this to shame you. I did it because I'm running out of time, and I needed to know the truth about what happens when I'm gone. Kate quietly gathered her folder and stood. Her face was unreadable. Your plan may have shown you something, but it's cost us more than you realize. Without waiting for a reply, she turned and walked out. Anne followed silently, her expression grim. Camilla remained a moment longer, then left without a word, the door clicking shut behind her. Charles was alone. He poured a glass of whiskey, his hands shaking slightly. As he stared into the amber liquid, the silence around him felt deafening. His plan had succeeded in exposing fault lines, but it had also carved new ones, deeper, permanent. He had wanted to test their loyalty, but in doing so, he had broken something that might never be repaired.